There are smiles that shine like sunlight, yet underneath, they hide a storm. Elena Matthews never forgot that moment. The moment she stood in the middle of her wedding hall, her white gown billowing like clouds, her eyes radiant as she gazed at the man she believed would be her safe harbor for life. Richard Cole, the young, charming businessman who had once set so many hearts aflutter, yet chose her alone to be his wife. That day, friends, colleagues, even powerful figures from the business world showered them with blessings. Compliments echoed everywhere. The golden couple, made for each other. They will have a perfect family. Elena believed it all. She believed in Richard's tender gaze, in the whispered promise he made. I will always be here, no matter what. The first months of marriage truly felt like a dream. They lived in a luxurious apartment in the heart of the city, sipping coffee together in the mornings, sharing candlelit dinners at night. Elena left behind the noise of the outside world, choosing to be the steady support for her husband, dreaming of children's laughter filling their home. They spent hours talking about names for their future child. Richard chuckled as he pictured a little girl running around calling him Daddy. Elena smiled too, her eyes gleaming. And I'll teach her to play the piano. In those moments, she was certain that nothing could shake her happiness. But hidden within that joy were small cracks Elena had yet to notice. 6 months after the wedding, their attempts to conceive remained fruitless. At first, Richard teased, "Maybe our baby is still choosing the perfect time to arrive." Elena laughed along, but as test after test showed only one line, Richard's smile began to fade. He suggested they visit the hospital. Elena didn't object. She wanted to know why. One test followed another. Needles, vials of blood, supplements. Their home, once filled with fresh flowers, was now cluttered with medical appointments and bottles of pills. Elena told herself, "This is only a small challenge. We'll get through it." Yet some evenings, when she looked beside her, Richard no longer spoke as he once did. Instead, his eyes drifted to the glow of his phone, punctuated by weary sighs. One day, as they sat in the doctor's office, the physician explained they needed more time for conclusive results. Richard held Elena's hand, but his grip was loose, as though it was only for show. Elena dared not think further. She clung to love, to the memory of their wedding day. Still, a vague unease began to stir within her. One morning, while tidying the kitchen, she overheard Richard on the phone. "No, I don't know either. Maybe it's because of her." Elena's heart sank. From that day on, whenever she saw Richard laugh and socialize, she felt a cold veneer beneath it all. Even so, she tried to hold on to faith. In her diary, she wrote, "We will have a child. This love is worth waiting for." She didn't yet know that those diary pages would one day stand as evidence of a faith betrayed, of a happiness that seemed unshakable but was, in truth, as fragile as glass. In the months that followed, the atmosphere in their home shifted in ways Elena barely noticed at first. Each morning, Richard no longer asked if she had slept well. Instead, he skimmed through his schedule, sometimes skipping breakfast just to make it to another meeting. In the evenings, when Elena prepared a warm dinner, he often came home late, citing business clients or overtime. At first, Elena comforted herself, telling herself it was just work pressure, that she only needed to be patient. But that patience soon became a burden. One evening, when Elena gently suggested, "Maybe we should try another fertility center. Perhaps the results will be better," Richard slammed his glass onto the table. "Don't you get it? How many times already? How many times have you let both of us down? I'm exhausted." Those words cut into her like a blade. Elena froze, unable to believe that the man who once promised to always stand by her could speak to her that way. From that moment on, the reproaches grew more frequent. When friends asked how things were going, Richard would half joke, half criticize, "We're still waiting for a miracle, but maybe Elena needs to try harder." People laughed it off, but Elena caught fleeting glances of pity before they quickly disappeared. She began to wonder, was it really her fault? Gaslighting seeped into her life day by day. Richard knew how to phrase things to make Elena question herself. "Are you sure you're taking your medication regularly? Did you do something wrong and hide it from me?" Each time, Elena felt like she was the cause of everything. At night, while Richard slept soundly with his back to her, she lay awake, her pillow damp with tears. One day, Elena accidentally walked in on Richard in his study. He quickly shut a folder of medical papers as soon as he saw her. "Just company documents," he said hurriedly. But in that brief moment, Elena caught sight of a familiar doctor's name on the cover. Her chest tightened, yet she didn't dare ask. She feared the answer, feared the truth would shatter what little remained of their fragile bond. Then, one afternoon, Elena left work early, planning to cook Richard's favorite dish to rekindle their intimacy. But when she stepped into their favorite restaurant, her world collapsed. Richard sat at a table with another woman, his hand resting on hers, his eyes glowing with a light Elena hadn't seen directed at her in a long time. Elena stood frozen at the entrance. The cold wind blew in from the street, but inside, their laughter echoed like hammers striking her heart. That night, when Richard came home, Elena gathered all her courage to ask directly. He didn't deny it, nor did he apologize. He only shrugged. "I need someone who can give me a real family. You can't do that." That verdict shattered her. In that moment, Elena realized not only was her marriage destroyed, but the image of herself had been twisted and crushed by him for so long. Love had turned into blame, and Richard, the man who once vowed to spend a lifetime with her, was now using her deepest wound to cast her out of his life. That conversation that night was only the beginning of a long, dark stretch. Richard no longer hid his affair, and the coldness in his eyes whenever he looked at Elena sent a shiver through her. The house that had once been their haven had become nothing more than 4 cold walls, where each meal was swallowed under the weight of silence. Elena tried to hold on, but the harder she tried, the farther Richard drifted away. One morning, he placed a thick stack of papers on the table. Divorce papers. No preamble, no hesitation. "I think we should end this. You know why?" Richard said, his voice as impersonal as if he were signing a business contract. Elena went numb. Those black and white pages were like a death sentence for every hope she had left. She read her own name over and over, saw Richard's cold signature at the bottom, and felt as though someone had closed a fist around her heart. In the days that followed, everything moved so fast, Elena couldn't keep up. Richard hired lawyers, skillfully twisted the narrative, painting her as a weak woman, unfit to be a mother, incapable of keeping a family together. Mutual friends gradually turned their backs, believing what he said. In their eyes, Elena became the failure. The day she left the apartment, Elena carried only a single suitcase of clothes and a few old books. It was pouring rain. The taxi carrying her rolled past familiar streets, every corner a reminder of sweet memories now reduced to shards. She sat still, watching raindrops stream down the window, merging with her own tears. That night, Elena arrived at the small apartment she had managed to rent. The room was empty, furnished only with an old bed and a weak yellow bulb. She sat on the floor, clutching her suitcase, feeling as though the whole world had abandoned her. The rain outside was relentless, but inside her, the storm raged even fiercer. She asked herself, "What did I do wrong? Am I really as broken as he said?" In the days that followed, Elena wrestled with pain and humiliation. She went to work with a hollow mind, then came home at night to cry herself empty. Each time she looked in the mirror, she no longer recognized the woman who had once glowed in a wedding dress. That woman was gone, replaced by a thin shadow with dark circles under her eyes and a heart full of cracks. There were moments when Elena wanted to give up entirely. But then, flipping through her old diary, she saw the line she had once written. "This love is worth waiting for." She realized she had let someone else define her life's worth for far too long. For the first time in months, a small but steady thought flickered inside her. I have to live, and live differently. Not to prove anything to Richard, but to save myself. The first days after the divorce were trials Elena had never imagined. The small apartment she rented was just big enough for a bed, an old wooden table, and a tiny electric stove. Each morning, she cooked herself a simple breakfast, usually just bread and weak coffee, then put on her coat and stepped out into the city in search of work. Elena sent her resume to dozens of places. Some politely declined. Some never replied. Some invited her for an interview only to smile apologetically after glancing at her history. "You took too much time off for family." Each remark felt like a fresh scratch, a reminder of the years she had lost. At one interview, the manager was blunt. "We need someone fully committed. Given your situation, I'm afraid you're not a fit." Elena pressed her lips together, nodded, and left. Outside, the sun blazed mercilessly, light glaring off the pavement, yet inside she felt nothing but cold. At night, when the streets had quieted, Elena lay on her old bed, staring up at the ceiling. The fan whirred steadily, but her mind was a whirlpool of doubt. Was Richard right? Was she truly useless? Tears slipped out, though this time she didn't cry out loud. She was afraid that if she wept endlessly, she'd lose the sound of her own voice forever. One evening, Elena stopped in front of a small bookstore. She bought a new notebook, promising herself a fresh start. On the first page, with a trembling but determined hand, she wrote, "I will not let the past decide my future." The words felt like a vow to herself. From then on, Elena began to rebuild, piece by piece. She took a part-time job at a cafe. The pay was low, the hours long, but at least she felt she was standing on her own feet. She learned to manage bills, to budget carefully. Each saved coin, however small, became proof that she could start over. One day, while clearing a table, a regular customer told her, "You have very sad eyes, but your smile makes people trust you." Elena paused, then gave a faint smile. It had been so long since anyone had recognized something good in her. That simple compliment was like a tiny flame in the dark. Still, the journey of rebirth was never easy. Some nights, counting coins to pay the electricity bill, Elena felt despair pressing her to the edge of surrender. But then she remembered the day she left Richard's apartment with nothing but a suitcase. If she had stood tall then, she saw no reason to collapse now. One rainy afternoon, on her way home, Elena passed the campus of her old university. The laughter of students, the familiar scent of damp books and paper made her stop for a long moment. A thought crossed her mind. Why not study again? Why not give myself a new chance? At first, it was just a faint idea, but with time it burned brighter. She began researching short courses in business and management. When she submitted her application for an evening class, her hands trembled as though she were once, again, a student full of dreams. The night before her first class, Elena wrote in her notebook, "Tomorrow I will no longer be just a shadow of the past." The first steps of rebirth were not yet a victory, but for Elena, they were already a silent revolution. From a woman once branded as useless, she was slowly beginning to see herself in the mirror again. Not flawless, still tired and thin, but with eyes lit by a steady flame Richard could never extinguish. During the evening classes, Elena usually sat in the back row, quietly taking notes, trying her best not to draw attention. She felt out of place among the younger faces, so full of energy and ambition. More than once, she thought of giving up. But then she would remember the line written in her notebook, "I will not let the past decide my future." One day, during a group discussion on a business assignment, Elena looked up and met a familiar gaze. The man across from her smiled gently, a smile that stirred memories of long-ago university days. He was Daniel Hartman, an old classmate from a few of her major courses. "Is that you, Elena? It's been such a long time," Daniel said, his voice a mix of surprise and warmth. Elena nodded shyly. She hadn't expected to see him again, least of all at a moment when she felt so fragile. After class, Daniel walked beside her toward the parking lot. The night air was chilly. "I remember you used to volunteer for library duty just to earn some extra money. To see you still so determined now, that's admirable," he remarked. Elena blushed, touched and embarrassed at once. She wasn't used to someone noticing her strengths. In the weeks that followed, they spoke more often. Daniel shared that he had been married once, but his wife had passed away after an illness. He was raising his young daughter alone, working while pursuing further studies to advance his startup project. There was a flicker of sorrow in his eyes when he spoke of his loss, yet it was laced with resilience. Elena felt an unexpected kinship, as though their souls bore similar scars from life's trials. One evening, as they studied together in the library, Daniel noticed her sitting in silence too long. He asked softly, "What are you thinking about?" Elena exhaled slowly. "I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. I've lost so much. Sometimes it feels like I have nothing left to start over with." Daniel was quiet for a moment before replying, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Elena. Not to me, not to the past. You just need to prove to yourself that you deserve a future." The words caught in her throat. It had been so long since she'd heard encouragement without judgment. In the warm light of the library, Daniel's face radiated a sincerity that made her want to believe again. From that day forward, Daniel became her companion on this new path. He never showed pity, never rushed her. When Elena was weary, he simply sat beside her, offering his shoulder. When she triumphed in a class presentation, he grinned as though it were his own victory. Elena realized that her strength no longer came only from pain. It was nourished by the presence of someone who believed in her. Daniel was like a mirror, reflecting back the worth she had long forgotten. One evening, after class, they sat in a small cafe near campus. Elena glanced around at the young couples laughing together, then looked at herself and Daniel, quiet and reserved. Suddenly she chuckled. "We must look so out of place, the two oldest in the class still hanging on." Daniel laughed too, his eyes glinting with empathy. "The difference is, we know what we're fighting for, And that's what really matters. In that moment, Elena no longer felt alone. She understood that the road ahead would still be steep, but at least now, she didn't have to walk it by herself. The months of study and work gradually transformed Elena into someone new. She was no longer the bewildered woman who once wept in a tiny apartment, but a diligent student, a hard-working colleague, and more importantly, a woman who dared to dream of the future. Daniel remained by her side, patiently walking with her through every step. When Elena decided to enroll in an advanced business management course, he was the first to encourage her. "You have vision. If you don't try, you'll never know how far you can go," he said. His words became the push she needed to submit her application. The turning point came when the two of them launched a small project in the field of green technology. At first, many scoffed. Two people going back to school in midlife, where would they get the experience? But Elena didn't give up. They stayed up nights drafting proposals, knocking on company doors to seek partnerships. Their first pitch was a disaster. Elena walked out of the hall with tearful eyes, ready to collapse, but Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. One failure isn't the end, it's just the beginning of the story. They kept revising, learning from mistakes. On the second try, they received a nod from a small investor. With that modest capital, the project began. For the first time in years, Elena felt she was building something that truly belonged to her. Confidence returned, not loud or fleeting, but steady, like roots growing deep. Amid their progress, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The day she held the test showing 2 lines, she sat still for hours, tears streaming non-stop. Not tears of despair, but of release. After years of being branded infertile, her body had spoken a different truth. When Elena showed Daniel the ultrasound results, he embraced her tightly, his voice breaking. "See, you were never the problem. You are the miracle." Pregnancy was both challenging and joyful. Daniel was always there, driving her to checkups, preparing tiny items for the baby. And when their first child's cry echoed through the delivery room, Elena felt as though the dark chapter of her life had finally closed. On that small, fragile face, she saw the future Richard had once stolen from her, now returned in a more beautiful form. But happiness didn't stop there. After a simple, heartfelt wedding, Elena and Daniel continued to build their family. They welcomed a set of twins, then 2 more children. Laughter filled their modest suburban home. Each morning, as their 5 children chattered around the breakfast table, Elena often sat still for a moment, imprinting the scene in her heart. Day by day, she affirmed to herself that this was what truly mattered. Alongside her family, her career also flourished. Their green technology project grew from a small team into a company gaining recognition from many organizations. Elena was no longer just a supporter in the background. She rose into leadership, speaking confidently at conferences she had once never dared to imagine. The woman who had once been pushed to the brink now had a voice, a position, and a complete family. One evening, sitting with Daniel on their porch, Elena looked at the sunset sky and whispered, "The day Richard left, I thought I lost everything. But now I know. That was the day I began the journey to find myself again." Daniel smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "And you found more than you ever dreamed of." Those simple words meant more to Elena than any apology from the past. For the existence of Daniel and their 5 children was proof enough that no matter how cruelly life may break you, it can still bloom again. One early autumn afternoon, just after Elena finished giving a talk at a small entrepreneurship seminar, she glanced at her phone and saw an unfamiliar message. It was a digital card, pale blue with gold lettering. We are delighted to invite you to the baby shower of Richard Cole and his wife. Elena froze, her heartbeat quickening. After all these years, that name still lingered like a scar that had never fully faded. She sat in silence for a long while. A flood of questions rose in her mind. Who had sent it? Why invite her? Was it a mistake or a deliberate provocation? Whatever the reason, the card stirred a storm beneath the calm surface of her life. Elena closed her laptop and stared out the window. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering leaves across the ground, reminding her of that stormy night when she had carried a single suitcase away from her old home. That evening, Daniel found her sitting quietly at the dining table, the invitation open on her screen. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder and asked in his low voice, "What did you get?" Elena handed him the phone wordlessly. Daniel read the message, paused, then looked up at her. "Do you want to go?" Elena bit her lip, her eyes flickering with conflict. A part of her wanted to delete it immediately, pretend it had never arrived, but another part urged her forward. Maybe this was her chance to close the past, not with revenge, but by facing it head-on, proving how far she had come. "I don't know," Elena whispered. "What do you think?" Daniel smiled faintly, never imposing. "I think you don't need to prove anything to anyone. But if you want to stand in front of him one last time, to tell yourself you are free, then I'll be there with you." His words untangled the knot in her chest. Elena nodded slowly. She knew this wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation, but a true farewell to the ghost of her past. And this time, when she walked into that room, she would not walk in alone. That evening, the grand hall of a luxury hotel glittered with decorations. Blue and white balloons arched overhead, banquet tables shimmered with silk cloths, and the air buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the clink of glasses. At the center stood Richard Cole, immaculate in a tailored suit, his confident smile wide as he boasted to clusters of guests about the future, about the child soon to be born, as if the past had never existed. At exactly 6 o'clock, the tall doors of the hall swung open. Elena entered, Daniel's hand firmly holding hers. Behind them, 5 children trailed, dressed neatly, their eyes bright. The entire room fell silent. Whispers spread quickly, and all eyes turned toward the woman once cast aside by Richard. Elena said nothing. She simply smiled softly and walked forward with steady steps. For a few seconds, Richard was frozen, his smile stiffening. Then he gave a forced laugh, his voice rising sharply. "Well, what a surprise. Elena Matthews, or should I say Elena Hartman now, what are you doing here?" Calmly, Elena replied, "I was invited just like everyone else." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly across the hall. Some guests exchanged glances. Others began to notice the children clustered at her side. A woman whispered, "5 of them? Are they hers?" The murmur swelled through the room. Richard tried to regain control. He smirked. "You always did know how to draw attention. Still fond of your little dramas, I see. Don't tell me those kids are—" He trailed off, suspicion dripping from his tone. Elena stepped forward, her gaze so steady it unsettled him. "Yes, these are my children. Mine and Daniel's." Gasps rippled through the hall as the truth revealed itself. Richard's voice rose, angry and trembling. "Impossible. You were supposed to—" Elena cut him off, her tone still calm but resolute. "You once told me I was barren. You made me carry that burden for years, but the truth is different." From her handbag, She pulled an envelope and unfolded documents stamped with official seals. "These are the test results you hid. And here, a copy of the email you sent the doctor, instructing him to keep it secret. They prove it was you with the problem, not me." The crowd erupted. Guests near her stepped closer, glancing at the papers, whispering confirmation. One by one, eyes turned toward Richard, eyes filled with doubt and disappointment. His face flushed crimson, his hands shook. "She's lying, this is a forgery," he shouted, but the panic in his voice betrayed him. An older gentleman shook his head. "Richard, I once believed in you, but if this is true, then you destroyed a woman's life just to protect your pride." Elena said no more. She looked at Richard, her eyes no longer bitter, but free. "The day you left me, I thought I lost everything. But it turned out, that was the day I began to find myself again." Her words rang out, silencing the room. Daniel stepped up beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. Their 5 children gathered close, the most undeniable proof of her new life. Elena looked at them, then back at the crowd. Her smile was gentle yet carried unshakable strength. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came to show that truth always finds its way, and that real happiness cannot be stolen by lies." Applause broke out, not for spectacle, but for the quiet power radiating from her. Meanwhile, Richard stood like a statue, his face pale, his false smile erased. Surrounded by the noisy crowd, he was lonelier than ever. Elena turned, hand in hand with Daniel, leading their children toward the door. Each step away from the party was a step of farewell to the past. Behind her, the whispers buzzed on, but in her heart, there was only peace. As the banquet hall doors closed behind her, Elena drew in a deep breath. The cool evening air carried the fragrance of the hotel's garden, as though the world itself had turned a page. Beside her, Daniel gave her hand a gentle squeeze, pride glowing in his eyes without a single word. Their 5 children clustered around them, chattering excitedly. "Mama, why was everyone in there looking at us like that?" one of them asked. Elena bent down, stroking her eldest daughter's hair with a smile. "Because today, you gave me one more reason to be proud." They left behind the place that once held so much pain, their steps light and free. No more burdens, no more fear. Elena knew she had finally closed a long chapter. Richard remained inside, trapped in his own falsehoods, but Elena no longer cared. For her, the greatest victory was not watching him fall. It was realizing she had risen, that she had reclaimed her peace. That night, back in their modest suburban home, the family gathered in the warm glow of their living room. The children's laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft light. Daniel handed Elena a cup of hot tea, his voice tender. "See, you don't need to prove anything anymore. Everything you need is right here." Elena nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of joy. Deep inside, a whisper echoed, "I have won. Not through revenge, but through life itself. There are wounds that seem as though they will never heal. There are lies that can make us lose faith in ourselves. But if Elena's story teaches us anything, it's this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to keep walking even when the heart is heavy. The greatest success is not bringing down those who once hurt us, but finding happiness and peace for ourselves. So if you have ever been doubted, ever been labeled with a name that wasn't yours, remember, the truth will always find its voice, and your worth is not in what others say. It lies in how you rise, in the love you bring into the world, and in the peace you create for yourself. Share this story with someone who needs hope today, so they'll know. No matter how dark the past may be, there will come a day when you can step into the light and say, I have found myself,